Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you work, your financial situation just never seems to move fast enough? Like you're grinding every single day and the needle barely budges? Well, today I want to talk about a specific number that changes all of that. And that number is $20,000. Not $1 million. Not even six figures. Just $20,000 sitting in your account. And I promise you, once you truly understand what happens at this level, you're going to start looking at money completely differently. Now I know what you're thinking. Great. Another YouTube finance video about saving money and 20,000 number. And you're right, there are thousands of those, usually hosted by someone standing in front of a rented Hummer H2 telling you to just wake up at 4 a.m. and hustle harder. But that's not what we do here. On this channel, we break money down using real data, calm thinking, and a little bit of humor, because building wealth shouldn't feel like motivational boot camp. It should feel like finally understanding the game you've been playing your entire life. Today, we're going to cover wealth, acceleration, psychological transformation, career freedom, the hidden costs of being broke, and the smartest way to reach that first $20,000 faster. So let's get into it. The first thing that shifts dramatically at $20,000 is how fast your wealth starts to grow on its own. Here's what I mean. If you had $10,000 invested and you were earning an average 8% annual return, you'd be making around $800 a year. That's roughly $66 a month. Cool, right? Maybe covers your streaming subscriptions. But when you double that to $20,000 at the same return, you're suddenly generating $1,600 a year. That's over $130 a month. Money that's working for you without you lifting a finger. And here's where it gets really exciting. If you're saving $500 a month from scratch, you'll hit that first $20,000 in roughly 35 months. But your second $20,000 comes faster, closer to 26 months, because your original investment is also generating returns. The snowball has started rolling downhill, and it's picking up speed whether you push it or not. Now fast forward and imagine what happens when you have $500,000 invested. At 8%, you're generating $20,000 every single 6 months. Have $1 million portfolio? You're making $20,000 every 3 months, 1/4 of the year, without working an extra hour. This is the magic of compound interest, and $20,000 is really the point where you start to feel it working in your life in a tangible, meaningful way. But honestly, some of the most powerful changes at this level aren't about the math at all. They're about what happens inside your head. Think about where most people are financially. The median American savings account holds around $8,000. So if you've hit $20,000, you are sitting at 2.5 times the national median. That's not a small thing. Before this level, a financial setback could push you from 5 figures back down to 4. And that psychological hit is brutal. It can make you feel like you're back at square one. But when you have $20,000 and something goes wrong, you still have a cushion that keeps you above that line. You stop operating from a place of fear and start operating from a place of confidence. Morgan Housel, one of my favorite financial thinkers, has talked about how financial independence isn't just a destination. It exists on a spectrum. And literally every single dollar you save gives you a little more freedom than you had before. At $20,000, that feeling becomes real. Your identity starts to shift. You stop saying, "I'm bad with money," and you start believing you're someone who builds wealth. And that identity shift, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The decisions you make start to reflect who you believe you are. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: and that's career freedom. When you have zero savings, you're trapped. You need your job because losing it means you literally might not survive the month. You're at the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, just trying to cover food, shelter, and basic needs. But $20,000 changes your negotiating position with life entirely. If you're grinding through a job that's toxic, draining your mental health, maybe even affecting your physical well-being, that savings account becomes your exit ramp. If you can live on $2,000 to $3,000 a month, $20,000 buys you 6 to 10 months of runway to find something better. That's enough time to completely pivot careers, get a new certification, launch a side business, or take interviews without desperation clouding your judgment. At $10,000, you might get 3 or 4 months before you're forced to take whatever job is available. At $20,000, you have real options. Here's another thing that most people never talk about, which is the hidden tax of being broke. When you don't have money, everything costs more as a percentage of what you earn. Bank overdraft fees, for example. In 2022, American banks collected nearly $10 billion in overdraft fees alone. That's a $35 hit every time your account dips too low, and it's a hit that falls hardest on the people who can least afford it. Then there are monthly maintenance fees from major banks that can run $12 a month unless you maintain a minimum balance. If you're already stretched thin, you're paying just to have an account. Beyond banking, there's the inability to buy in bulk, meaning you miss out on 20 to 30% savings at wholesale stores. You buy cheaper products that fall apart sooner, costing you more over time. You pay insurance monthly instead of annually, missing out on discounts. All of these small costs add up to a significant disadvantage. $20,000 breaks you out of that trap entirely. And then there's what I like to call the offensive side of having $20,000, which is becoming part of the investor class. At this level, you can max out your Roth IRA, which in 2025 has a contribution limit of $7,000 per year, and still have $13,000 left over. Try doing that comfortably with only $10,000. You'd be throwing 70% of your entire savings into one account and hoping nothing goes wrong. At $20,000, you can build a genuinely diversified portfolio. We're talking index funds, ETFs, REITs, bonds, even individual stocks in a taxable brokerage account. Some index funds require minimum investments of $3,000 just to get in. Options that were simply unavailable to you before suddenly open up. A realistic $20,000 breakdown might look like $7,000 in a Roth IRA, $8,000 in a fully stocked emergency fund, $2,000 in checking for everyday spending, and $3,000 in a taxable brokerage account. That's a complete financial foundation. There's one final reason $20,000 matters so deeply, and it's about delayed gratification. There was a famous psychology experiment from Stanford in the 1970s, where young children were given a choice between eating 1 marshmallow immediately or waiting 15 minutes to receive 2 marshmallows. The children who waited demonstrated extraordinary self-control. Researchers tracked these same kids over decades and found that those who could delay gratification performed better academically, had higher test scores, and achieved greater success professionally. Even Susan Wojcicki, the late CEO of YouTube, was reportedly part of this study, and her mother described her as having more self-restraint than any other participant. Getting from $10,000 to $20,000 is proof that you have that same muscle. You resisted the urge to spend. You stayed consistent. You built discipline. And discipline compounds just like money does. So how do you actually get to $20,000 if you're not there yet? Three things. First, know your baseline. Calculate your actual net worth right now and figure out exactly what's coming in and going out each month. You cannot optimize what you haven't measured. Second, play defense. Track every single expense for at least 30 days. Most people find $200 to $500 in monthly spending leaks they didn't even know existed. Subscriptions they forgot about, delivery fees that stack up, habits that quietly drain the account. One person I helped found over $800 a month disappearing into ride shares alone. That kind of awareness changes everything. Third, play offense. Ask for a raise if your performance warrants it, and you haven't had one recently. 5 to 10% more income accelerates your timeline dramatically. Add a side hustle. Sell things you no longer use. Every extra dollar toward this goal matters more right now than it ever will again because of what it unlocks on the other side. $20,000 is not just a number. It's a turning point. It's the moment wealth starts building itself, fear starts losing its grip, and your options in life genuinely multiply. The game changes here. And once you experience it, you'll understand exactly why.